staying in line with the overall goal of the show, which is to arm and acquaint beginner to intermediate players, between in the 6 to 1200 USCF rating range with basic tactical ideas, but also some of the other ideas, namely positional ideas that go into playing a chess game. Unfortunately, even though some have claimed that tactics is 99% of chess, there's arguably a little bit more to it than just tactics. Namely, we need to learn how to apply a lot of different positional principles, namely controlling the center, developing rapidly, creating weaknesses, avoiding weaknesses. Once a weakness has been created, developing a plan around that and sticking to it. So that's more or less going to be the theme of today's tactics time. We're just going to go over one game. We're going to go over a game between Elijah Williams and Howard Staunton that was played in 1851, so it was a little while ago, not necessarily a modern game. Played in the Romantic era, but this doesn't necessarily fit the bill of it's played in the spirit of many Romantic games in as much as e4 is played. It's met with c5. But then we start to become all too painfully aware of the fact that this is being played way before opening theory. Right? Yeah, I see. Yeah, Ken West making a face. Who would play f4 against c5? As I was looking at this with Danny earlier, and you have to play knight c3 if you want to get into the Grand Prix, because you can just black and break with d5 here and get a decent game going. Okay. All the more reason for me to pick this game. It's not, there's no established theory that we're really going off of. Only the board and positional considerations to help us evaluate and assess the plans made by the players on both sides. So far, pretty basic stuff. Developing minor pieces, controlling the center with pawns, still controlling the center with pawns. And now we see White come up with a plan and begin to commit to it. He's got a little bit of a threat here. And I'm not being sarcastic. It's a tiny one, but it's one that can be undervalued at times. And what White is threatening to do here, guys, is capture on c6. Why would that be a threat? Anybody? Does that capture threaten to create any positional weaknesses? Maybe an undesirable pawn formation? Doubled pawns on the c file. Yes, Ashish. Yes, exactly. Which doesn't seem like the greatest of plans, especially not in the Sicilian. But we're going to see White come up with this plan and stick to it, and we'll see if he makes it work. Black arguably isn't really taking the plan too seriously. He just wants to fianchetto his dark squared bishop, so he plays g6 in order to do that, and White follows through on his plan. Captures on c6, forcing doubled pawns, creating that weak c5 square, which is more or less going to be the theme throughout the game. We're going to see the kind of problems that arise for Black by allowing this weakness to be created, and how White goes about trying to convert an attack on this weakness into a winning advantage, and then convert that winning advantage into an actual win. Two options or two possible ways that White can continue with his plan. Okay, he's created the weakness. He wants to fix the weakness. When we've created a weakness on the board, we want to fix it. Any suggestions to how we might go about fixing the weakness? I agree. And I think if we put it, the engine might like Queen e2 a little bit more because it's flexible and it doesn't create the backward d pawn, and it just makes more sense. But I liked this because, again, he's sticking to his plan. He's created that weakness on c5, and for better or worse, he's just going to create this bind on d5 with the c4, something that you typically see after the d pawn has been exchanged on d4 for the c pawn. That's when you see this kind of, when you're more likely to see this kind of bind setup with pawns on d5 and e4 for white. But we see it here with the d pawn not, still on its home square. Both sides continue developing. And again, with the idea of keeping that weakness a permanent weakness. It's white to move, but I want you guys to pass the move and pretend as if it were black to move. What would black want to play here in order to not have to worry about that c5 weakness? What do you think? D5. Yeah. Oh, just you want to break immediately. And
I won't be fair, but eventually I want to play d5, so for exchange I can put the c pawn on the d5.
Yeah, d5 is ultimately the goal. Unfortunately, in this particular position, I believe that d5 would still, it would lose the pawn, but my overarching point would be that it would still leave c5 undefended. If it were black to move and his only priority were to defend that c5 pawn, how might he go about doing that? Just looking for a move that defends this pawn. d6, right? There are the bishop moves, but d6 looks reasonable since we haven't moved that d6, that d pawn yet. So, if we wanted to stop black from doing that, well, what might we play with white? I'm sorry? d5. Preventing d6. Now, look at it closely, because a lot of people are, as I showed this game around the club, many people, close to us in strength, they want to ask immediately, are you sure that that really prevents d6? And it's worth asking. And if he were to play d6 here, you'd more or less be safe. We'd be able to go with a similar idea to the one that you just suggested us each. And then that queen e5 is the saving grace there. Pretty cool, right? Pretty cool. So the side moral of that story is concrete calculation pays healthy dividends. But a lot of these decisions are not being made with calculation and more on positional considerations, all right? Which I'm hoping is going to provide a nice healthy contrast to the Morphy game and some of the other kind of one-sided games that we've been looking at where it's someone just getting crushed because they have no positional understanding. And we've got a cool tactical finish at the end to reward us for slogging through this. Okay, knight h6. So he develops a piece. Knight e7 may have been a better choice here, but he wants to, either way, he wants to get that knight on f5. White continues to develop logically, not trying to press or do anything crazy. There's no good pawn lever or pawn break, meaning no move that we can make with a pawn, putting it, attacking another, which would cause a favorable change in the position for us. So we just keep developing our pieces and putting them on the squares where they look best. Now I know if I had black here, I would be terrified of that knight on e4. That guy's a monster here. Okay. And after, it's black to move, but what white is threatening here after knight e4 is g4, kicking the knight away, and then playing that tasty check on d6. Okay, removing the threat, getting the king. So now the idea of g4, kicking the knight away, and knight d6 doesn't quite have as much force to it. You'll get your knight on d6, where you may be able to be dislodged by that dark squared bishop at one point, but you're not going to have the benefit of keeping the king in the center that you would have had in the previous line. So he doesn't put his knight on d6, he just keeps improving his position, plays d3, finally creating a little room for his dark squared bishop, if need be. And black thinks he's being clever, making use of the file that he allowed white to open with move 5, bishop takes c6. Doesn't have too much to worry about, just following a lot of the principles and guidelines that we've been familiarizing ourselves with over the past few weeks. Castle's early, he's got a nice solid grip on the center, and almost all of his minors, with the exception of the dark squared bishop, have been developed. So white's looking okay. That d5 gets played here, Andreas. And now we're going to see whether or not it was premature or well-timed. And for those of you curious, ED is a line here too. It probably might be a little bit better, but I'm not going to be angry at Elijah Williams for playing knight c3 here. I think it's still playable, but it does allow black the option of closing the center with d5, d4 at any point, which looks annoying to those, right? Ken, does that look annoying? Yeah, right? It would appear that he's kind of eliminating his weakness, but you're going to see some clever ways that white still manages to hammer away at c5, even though d4 is allowed. But again, maneuvering and just slowly improving your position. So yeah, I'm speeding through it. So this speaks to your point here, Ken. c5, d4 hasn't been played, but he's still threatening d4. But by playing b3, no, this is a threat aimed at c5. Can you believe that? If it were white to move here, this is what he wants to play, something like this. And yeah, no matter where he goes, no matter where the queen goes, pick a square, but I mean, I'm going to pick it's getting driven away. And you're going to pick up that pawn. Fair enough? So b3 looks like just a quiet move, maybe just reinforcing c4, but it's also played with the intent of giving the knight some protection so that you can attack c5 and the queen simultaneously. So b3, threatening knight a4, which would be attacking the queen. He responds to that by putting the queen on c7, removing that threat. And we just keep hammering away at the original weakness which we created. c5. Cool. Okay. Reinforcing our king safety a little bit. And just continuing to play chess. Now, if you put this in a computer, here, white is finally starting to probably get an advantage. Okay. So h5 is a neat little idea here. Trying to crack it open. Defending it. Bringing this queenside knight over to the king side. But kind of tempting him into playing d4 and closing the position, which I personally would not like, but white's okay with it. And it's worth noting here that although there are no immediate threats in the position, I mean, most of us, speak up now if you disagree with me, but I would prefer white here. And just optically, I just count how many attacking pieces I have versus his on the king side. And I'm feeling pretty good about my chances, even though there are no concrete lines that I see for. But here, black makes it easy for us. Right? He opens a line of attack against the king. And we started this lesson by discussing, the downside or the disadvantages to having doubled pawns. Sometimes by allowing doubled pawns, we create attacking lines. So it's not so cut and dry, right? Sometimes they're okay. Sometimes there's compensation that we can reap. And knight f4 gets played here, with the idea of threatening taking gh. With knight on f4, then you're threatening. Yeah. So we put this here, and now we're threatening capturing here, right? Because we've got 3 attackers and 2 defenders. There's the pawn is the third. What is he trying to do? Checkmate, right? Yeah, by setting up a battery on the light squares. Yeah, yeah, cool, okay. And he wants to put her, whoa, not there, but here. Can you see why he would want to put her there? Yeah, so that on the next move he can put her there and say, I win. Yeah? White doesn't seem too worried though. He's created open F and H files. His pieces are more active. He's got more space. He defends against the threat while creating some more threats. So now, no checkmate on this square, but we have an attacking piece on an open file aimed in the direction of your king. Important stuff. Okay. Getting another piece ready to bring into the attack. So this little rook lift with the idea of putting him on the H file at some point. Lashing out. Sometimes when we're winning and we have a crushing position, the hardest part is to just coolly navigate against your opponent lashing out, right? Doing crazy stuff and not getting kind of not allowing yourself to be swindled or tricked. F5 doesn't scare him. He just says, okay, I'm going to get more space and create a passed pawn. I think most of us would play GF here. And this is the sequence that, you know, made me feel somewhat justified in putting this in a lecture titled Tactics Time. So I'm going to let you guys look at this for a while. And you at home, think about it too. What would you play with white here? And why? Queen takes h7. All right, pause. How about you?
That's what I was
Did you see it? Okay. Anyway. All right. So.
now I bring in the knight takes.
Yeah, that's the first line that they give us each, and then actually they like 97 after that. So, yeah, king f7, 97.
97.
Yeah. Okay.
Which cuts off a little bit.
Cuts them off, and we still have a fair amount of work to do, but not really. I mean, yeah, you're still crushing him. I'd be probably most moves in this position are killer. But yeah, Elijah Williams had an interesting idea. He just played knight takes g6. Yeah. With the idea of recapturing on h2 with the rook, right?
It's already there.
If rook takes queen, which will happen, then the rook will recapture, and there will still be threats very similar to those in the line that we just looked at. Make sense?
I think it's a faster mate this way.
I agree. Again, without looking at it too closely. So that is what gets played. Black, you know, rightfully so, is a bit suspicious of this and does not does not capture the queen immediately, but decides to capture on f6, doing a few different things. You know, at the very least, on a good day, maybe he's dreaming about something like this. Maybe if the rook doesn't recapture, who really knows what he's thinking.
I see it, okay. Doesn't work.
All right, so we better make sure that we know what we're doing, right? Okay, let's force a mate. Who's going to shout out that force mate and show me what a tactical wizard they are? F7, King G7.
I would check first with the rook.
I think that may be stronger. Now it's a little more forcing, right? A little more forcing. Where is he going? He's going home to cry. No, he's going to F7. Okay. Get the notation right. Yeah. But you did good. You won. Yeah. Knight what? Knight what 5? Or maybe I just need to clean my ears out. Yeah. Knight E5. Yeah. Yeah, I may have misheard you. Yeah. I thought you said D5.
That kind of hurts.
Yeah, it is painful. That's a painful looking mate. And that's definitely a tactical finish, but one that only happened after he.
Oh, I didn't see that was made. I just was looking at the queen. The
Yeah.
queen, not the king.
Okay. I hope you guys enjoyed that.
So-
Hit like, share, and subscribe at home. Okay. See you guys next week.